I'm Robert, and welcome to Robert's Guitars and Gear. Today I'm going to do a video that I've wanted to do for a long time, which is how do you pick a guitar if you have smaller hands? Now, I don't have real small hands, but I play a lot and I'm a little older, and my hands have gotten stiff over time, especially if I play more. And so I have cycled through so many guitars trying to find guitars that will really work with the way my hands are working right now. Now, I want to say first a word of encouragement. If you have smaller hands, you might be a kid or you might be an adult that just has smaller hands, you really can play any guitar. Every guitar I talk about in this video, I have played and enjoyed. What we're really getting at here is comfort. If you're more comfortable with your guitar, you're going to play it more. You're going to enjoy it more. Now, the other thing I will say is, if you really have a guitar you want to play and you're feeling a little uncomfortable with it, if you're a newer player, your hands will stretch out, and they'll stretch out a ton. So in the time that I've been playing, my hands have gotten much more flexible. There's all kinds of videos about warm-up exercises and things you can do that will over time stretch your hands out. So if you have a guitar that you want to play and it's a little bit, feels a little big for you, you can work on that and you can get there, and I promise you. But what I'm going to talk about now is how to make that journey just a little bit easier. And what are the key measurements or key specs that are critical if you have smaller hands? Now, I'm going to start with specs that are easy to find, and then I'm going to move to specs that I have developed that I believe correlate very well to comfort with smaller hands. And I'll go through a number of guitars and illustrate the key points. Now, I'm starting with this Stratocaster. This is really an unusual Stratocaster. It's a 1987 Squier, first year made in Korea. It's quite a fabulous Stratocaster, and it just illustrates everything I'm going to talk about because it has two characteristics that are really important. The first is scale length. Scale length is your distance from your nut to your bridge. This has a standard Fender scale length of 25.5 inches. That is as big as you get with the most common electric guitars in the industry, and that's going to be a problem or harder if you have smaller hands. In fact, if I compare this guitar to the one right behind me, the Fender Duosonic, to go from the nut to the 4th fret, that distance difference is 8 millimeters. Okay, that when you're talking about hands and playing guitar, that is a huge difference. So the first measurable that's really critical is scale length. If you have smaller hands and you're really looking for comfort, at least to start, then you're going to want a shorter scale length guitar. Now, at one extreme end are guitars really intended for children. These are mini type guitars. They have a 22 to 23 inch scale length. You've got Ibanez Micros, you've got mini Stratocasters and Jazzmasters, and you have the brand new Epiphone power players. They have an SG and a Les Paul. That's one extreme. I have not tried any of those guitars, but for an adult or an older kid that's getting pretty close to adult size, I think a 24-inch scale like you'll see in the Fender offsets, like that Duosonic, or the 24 3/4 that you'll see in the Les Paul style guitars is going to be quite okay. It's quite okay for me. For some of you that are more on the edge, the PRS 25.0 inch scale might be okay too. But what I will tell you is if you are trying to get into a Strat at a 25.5 inch scale, that's going to be hard for you. So thankfully, the scale length is a common spec that is published with every guitar, and that will help you get started. Now, the second thing that's really critical has to do with the shape and size of the neck. And this will become, once you get the scale length in range, then this becomes really critical. Now, this is a little bit harder to discern because there's not many published specs about it. The one published spec that you'll commonly see is the width of the neck at the nut. Now, in all the guitars I have, I only have two different values for this. The smaller one is 1.65 inches. The larger is 1.69. What my research now shows is that both of them can be completely okay for you if you have smaller hands. All right, so what do I look at next? Well, the next published thing is not published all the time, but you will see it in some reviews. And in some sites like Wildwood Guitars will publish this, but they only sell really higher end guitars. So you have to really hunt for this, is the height of the neck. And they'll do this at the first fret, just like this, and they'll do it at the 12th, okay? And that's helpful if you can get that data, but it's hard to get. So I've actually come up with my own measurement technique, which is to measure the circumference of the neck. How far is it around? And I do that with a shoelace or a piece of string with a little knot on the end, and you just wrap it under the strings and wrap it around and measure it. You pull it back out and measure it. And that is fundamentally, once you're in the right scale, that's the measurement that's really going to help you. And I'm going to go through my collection of guitars and give you an idea of what I measured with each of them and how well I think that overall predicted the comfort that I would have in a guitar. What I will tell you is it correlates very well, but it's not correlate perfectly. What I mean by that is necks are shaped differently. They have different profiles. You'll talk about C profiles or Ds. And even with the same circumference, the same distance around, that shape will matter and will make a difference. So it's not a perfect predictor. But I have measured so many guitars now that I've owned and played that I'm going to tell you what I've learned and share the data. And I'll share the data in the description. I've even done some statistics and done a correlation between my perceived comfort of the neck and the different measurements. And I'll share that information in the description also. So let's walk through some guitars, going from ones that are more challenging for comfort to ones that are just magnificent. All right, so let's start with a couple guitars that I own or have owned that really are just on the wrong side of the comfort that I'm looking for with the neck. So this is a Fender Player Strat. It is an absolutely beautiful, well-crafted, fantastic guitar. But for my hand size, it's got two problems. One is, again, the 25.5-inch Fender scale. It just means trying to reach across is just a little bit harder. You can do it, and I have played this before in public, but just in terms of comfort, that's a big strike. The second strike is the neck circumference, as I measure it, both towards the nut and at the 12th, are just at the high end of what works for me. And so even though these are not big necks and they're well crafted, it's a great profile, just the circumference is a little bit big for me. So unfortunately, the Strat is just not going to be as comfortable as other guitars, even though it is an absolutely fabulous guitar. Now, again, if you love the Strat, if you want to play a Strat, then you just need to be committed to practicing with it and doing all those exercises that will stretch your hands out, and you can get there. So that's the Strat, the Player Strat. I expect that the Player Series Telecaster, Jazzmaster will be quite similar. Now, if you've already been looking for guitars with a more comfortable neck, you have probably seen a reference to the Gibson or the Epiphone slim taper neck. So here is a Les Paul style guitar. It's a heavily modified Epiphone. This is a traditional Pro 4. Again, a great guitar, and this one's got some great mods. So I love this guitar. It does have that slim taper neck. Now, a couple key things about this Epiphone. First of all, it's a 1.69 neck width. Again, that has not been a showstopper. 24 3/4 inch scale, of course. That's good. That can definitely work for you with the smaller hands. Now, the interesting thing about this profile, and I will say this, slim tapers are not all the same, and there's big variation. So still try, if you really are looking at a classic Gibson or Epiphone, try them out. This slim taper at the headstock is marginal. It's not a disaster. It's actually the exact same measurement as that Stratocaster. The problem with this slim taper is as you get towards the body, it does get a lot thicker and it just gets out of the range for me. So again, just like that Strat, I can play this. It's just not going to be as comfortable. And as much as I love this guitar, it just can't be in my regular rotation because it's simply not comfortable enough to play. But again, not every slim taper is the same. And if you really want a Gibson or Epiphone, check it out and see if you find one that works with your hands. Now, before I get into some guitars that I have found that are really, really great for profile, I just want to highlight a couple things you might have or you might find. I mentioned before, this is an 87 Strat, and in that era, this neck is really, really thin and really fast. In my metrics, this is as thin as any neck I have. Now, it's 25.5 inch scale, so that's got a big strike against it for playing, especially to be able to play everything you want to play. But you may find a guitar like this that feels great, and even though it's got a scale length that's really longer than you want, you may find the neck profile or the neck dimensions to still be okay. I could play this guitar. This one will stay on my wall. And again, especially if I'm just playing some chords, at church, this could be quite okay. In the same way, I have a 2010 Mexican standard Telecaster, and its neck is just a little bit bigger. Again, it's a 25.5 inch scale, but it is quite comfortable enough to play in terms of the circumference that in a pinch I could play that too. So you may have one of these guitars from different eras that can be enough of a compromise that they'll be okay for you. I want to talk about some guitars I have that I've measured that are just fantastic for comfort. Now, you may want a Les Paul style guitar, a single cutaway dual humbucker, yet that slim taper neck even is just not comfortable enough, and certainly a classic Les Paul with a 1959 style really thick baseball bat neck, not going to do it. Well, there's a family of guitars. These are D'Angelico, in this case, Atlantics. There's a moderate priced Premier Atlantic and a more expensive Deluxe Atlantic, but they're very competitive on cost considering the competition. These guitars, besides being just absolutely fantastic, they have a neck that is so commendably thin. The circumference all across the neck is just great. It's very, very competitive. It's a 24 3/4 scale. It is a 1.69 inch neck width, but in my metrics, I look at the circumference, not just that width, and I find these very comfortable to play. Again, you'll see in the description my actual measurements of these guitars, but if you can get your hands on a D'Angelico Atlantic, you're, I think, going to be quite happy. At least check it out, and they're just absolutely fantastic guitars, can play anything. All right, now I'm in my top echelon. These two guitars I'm going to talk about are absolutely spectacular for players with smaller hands. They both are in the Fender offset series. So this is an offset, and offset means it's not symmetrical top to bottom, the body. This is a duosonic. This is a Player Series duosonic, HS, made in Mexico. And the whole guitar is extremely ergonomic. You see it's a very thin body, and the neck is just fantastic. So first of all, 24-inch scale, so it really hits the scale great. I can stretch across this fretboard just spectacularly, and the neck circumference is extremely comfortable. It's just even a notch above the D'Angelicos for that. So that combination of a very comfortable neck circumference, 24-inch scale, I can wholeheartedly recommend this guitar. This particular guitar is such a good player. I have a review out on this guitar. You can do anything with this guitar. You play anything. It's great, and it's extremely comfortable for small hands. All right, my last guitar to show you is a Squier Bullet Mustang. Again, it's in an offset series, so you see it's not symmetrical. Very, very thin, contoured body, absolutely spectacularly comfortable. 24-inch scale, so again, it can reach anywhere on this fretboard. And this neck is the slimmest of any that I have measured. It is in the Hall of Fame for comfortable necks, and is the absolute best in the Fender universe for sure. These are great guitars. Don't be thrown off by the fact it's a Squier and it's a Bullet. These are well made. Considering the price range, they play great. And of course, you can buy it for under $200 and modify it. You can put in different hardware, pickups, the whole 9 yards. They play great, but if you're looking for that guitar that just is effortlessly comfortable, boy, you just can't beat this. It's just spectacular for that. Again, it's quite fun to play, quite well made, quite a great platform for more modification. So even though I have guitars that are $1,000 more than this, boy, is this fun to play, and it feels just great. I cannot recommend this guitar highly enough. Again, if you're a smaller frame person, you're buying for a kid, or you have that kind of arthritis or stiffness in your hands that you're fighting with, you can go a tremendously long way with this guitar. So that's my summary. I hope this is helpful to you. Again, in the description, I'll have the metrics that I've measured on my guitars. And I'm interested in your comments, interested in reaction you have. There's many brands I simply haven't tried. I just don't know. Would love to know if you have. And let's start a little conversation around this, see if we can help some other players that are struggling with this issue. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting the channel. Take care.